Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Jim Pinto for another episode of Metal Workshop. And I guess this is our post-break episode. We're just kind of coming back to it after a lull in recording, and so we thought we would just kind of catch up with each other and find out what we've been listening to and see where the discussion goes from there. So I guess I'll throw it to you, Jim. What have you been listening to since...
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, since I think the last time we recorded was right before you went to that convention.
I discovered this band called Autumn. That song Phantom Limb is just so good and so haunting. I've been listening to it a lot. And then Arch Matheos just came out with their second album. And that's been on repeat for me. And of course, Opeth. I'm always listening to Opeth.
Now, I think you sent me something by Autumn, right? I remember at least a very autumny looking album cover being sent to me, and then I followed the link and I went and I checked them out, and I remember liking them, but I don't remember much beyond them. Can you describe what Autumn is kind of all about?
I haven't researched the band at all, right? I was just listening to what I found on YouTube, but they've got I never say got. They have this sort of progressive, moody sound that I like. They remind me a little bit of Imaginos, which everybody thinks of Imaginos, the Blue Oyster Cult album. There's actually a band called Imaginos. And we're going to talk about female singers eventually, and there's two singers on that album that I want to talk about that I wish they'd done more work, but that's for another time. If you like moody, progressive music, Imaginos is fantastic, and this new band, Autumn, that I've discovered is just fantastic. The song's called The Phantom Limb.
And did Autumn have a female singer, or was it a...
It does. They do have a female singer, yeah. And they have other good songs, right? But The Phantom Limb is the first one off of the album of the same title. Oh, the album's called Stacking Smoke, sorry. But the song is just so good. And I think the album starts to wane towards the end. Maybe there's not enough range to some of the other songs.
Mm-hmm.
So the first half is really strong, and then after a while I get a little with it. But and apparently there's a couple of bands named Autumn, so you have to look.
Yeah, that's not surprising. That's not surprising that there's a couple of bands by that name. And you've been listening to Opeth as well, which I guess is sort of standard.
Yeah, I'm always listening to Opeth. But I happened upon some songs that I sort of skipped over in the past, and I'm rediscovering them now. And songs like Chrysalis and Voice of Treason have been playing over and over again for me in the background.
Now, do you generally listen to songs, or do you generally listen to albums? Like, I'll
go dig up the songs I want to hear, and then I'll let YouTube take me through their autoplay sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But then it doesn't matter what you're listening to, eventually it all leads to Scorpions Winds of Change.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's a pattern on YouTube with stuff like that.
Yeah. There's nothing you can do, and once it finds out that pattern, even if you don't like it, it will. They used to have this feature where you could say, play this song next.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that went away because it was too useful.
Yeah.
That's all I can figure out. I don't know what the logic was there. So now all you can do is tell it, no, don't play this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You can't actually train it to play the stuff you like. You can just teach it negatively what not to play for you.
Which is the worst way. That's the worst way to develop a playlist of any kind. I do that with, so when I'm looking at musical styles I don't understand, I'll often do it that way. Like if I'm like if it's like I want to listen to some Chinese music and I don't really know a lot about it, I'll kind of follow the trail on YouTube, and that's how I discover what I like. But when I'm listening to stuff that I have more of a handle on, I feel obligated to listen to the whole album for some reason, and I don't know if that's good or bad, because sometimes you hear songs you wouldn't otherwise hear, but you also don't get drawn to like the cream of the crop right away. Do you know what I mean? So I wonder about that method. But I've been listening to Unleash the Archers, which I don't know. I don't remember how that came up. You brought them up in some conversation.
Yeah. We were talking about we weren't even talking about female singers yet. I had just mentioned how hard that song "Tonight We Ride" is. I mentioned that I play it for my neighbors when they're being assholes, and I just blast it out the window. And so I think that's how we started talking about it. But then I sent you the link,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say you hooked up with all their stuff after that.
Well, I listen again. Sometimes it takes a few hits for things to land with me. Do you know what I mean? So like, I think you mentioned that, and I saw it, and then I saw another link, and I know that Tonight We Ride, when that came out, I saw it. It's like somebody posted something about it on Facebook. I might have even commented. But something was different this time around where I started paying. I think it was that what was the name of the song? General the Dark Army was maybe the song that really set me off. In fact, I think you had a facepalm moment when you first sent it to me because of something I said, and then I got really deep into their catalog, and I thought so. Number one, when I started listening to them, I started to second guess the idea we had of doing female-led bands as a concept for a show, because I was almost starting to think, well, wait, maybe that's like the wrong way to go about it. Do you know what I mean? Because when I was listening to her, the thing I liked about the singer for this band is that and this was confirmed when I started researching them and finding out information about them, but you can tell just by listening, she's modeling her vocals after the heavies. She's not just like modeling her vocals after her favorite female lead singer, right? So she's modeling them after Dickinson. And not that there's anything wrong with her having a favorite female singer or something, but if you're limiting yourself to just the female singers because you're a woman, then you're like eliminating a huge chunk of the greats, right? And so you're not going to have as much. And I feel like I can hear like the level that she hits in terms of like, I think she's probably my favorite metal vocalist, you know, that hasn't like say been around for the past 30 years. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like just like my favorite new metal vocalist. With like hands down, I put her up there with Bruce Dickinson and all the people on her list that she had of vocalists that influenced her, and so the vocals really impressed me. Also, the band, it almost has what I would say is sort of it's got like a progressive style to it in a lot of ways. Like there's the way that they structure their songs, the way that they play lead over chord progressions kind of feels a little bit progressive to me, but it's done in I guess maybe a way that's still got one foot in like the traditional side of things. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it still kind of harkens back to that earlier metal, and so it's just like a really nice blend because I feel like the musicianship is there, but it's also rooted in the old stuff that I like, and it's not in any way, it doesn't come off like, largely due to the lyrical content, it doesn't come off as pretentious or anything like that. It's just kind of, you know, good solid metal. And so I really found, I bought all of their albums, and it turns out I think their first album is actually my favorite now that I've had a chance to listen to them. But they're the kind of band where every album I could make an argument for it being their best album. And so I just really enjoyed them, and so thank you, number one, for introducing them to me. But number two, I wish I had been following this band, you know, longer than I have, because I was making up for lost time with them, just going through each album and, you know, just constantly listening to these songs in the car, and then I would find the 3 or 4 songs from each album that I really liked, and then just constantly play them. So that's pretty much what I've been doing. Probably
one of the things they've got going for them as a band is, and I think this has happened with a lot of bands, is that prog, the gap between prog and traditional metal is starting to narrow. Mm-hmm. Unless you're a band like Animals as Leaders, we could talk about them later. They have so many songs that aren't easily melodic on the ear, mm-hmm. right? Unleash the Archers, and the ones that are hardest on the ear are the ones that are really drawing the most from the prog movement, because they never get to that point where you get a comfortable rest.
Uh-huh.
Does that make sense?
No, I hear you. But I find them. But see, that's the weird thing, because one of the things that I find hard about prog is what you just said. But with Unleash the Archers, I don't like. They hit these moments that feel like those glorious metal, like just to use an example, like when you hear the chorus to Aces High, right? That gets me every time. It's simple. It works. There are a lot of moments like that in Unleash the Archers, even though it's got a lot of this other stuff that's more complex surrounding it. Do you know what I mean?
They don't make her voice the focus of every single song.
No, that's true.
And I think that space where she's struggling to find her melody,
mm-hmm.
On some of those deeper songs or some of those crunchier songs, I think that's where she's fighting what's going on, or they're fighting. I don't want to say it's her fault. And those songs make it harder to just listen to them.
I get you.
So,
well,
I like them a lot. Don't get me wrong. I have everything that they made, but I have a hard time with some of the material.
Do you have an example of one that stands out? Because I just want to make sure I understand what you're...
I'd have to go and do some research.
That's
honestly.
okay.
I haven't listened to the bad stuff in a while.
Because I'm just wondering if I agree with you or if I'm on the opposite side of you. And
you might be on the opposite side with me.
So,
this one.
Let me say because it's possible that I agree, but I don't know if I understand exactly what you're saying. So, one of the things that I was thinking when I was listening to them was, and this is maybe more of a general commentary on growls and the different vocal styles, I don't know that the growls are necessary in a band like this. Do you know what I mean? I feel like her vocals are strong enough that, like, it's like if you have Dio, why add, somebody with a growl voice to the mix? Do you know what I mean? Like, you have Dio. Just, lean on Dio. And I feel like by shifting to the growls, it kind of detracts from the fact that they have this really great, leader and lead singer in the band. They have somebody who's operating at like a Bruce Dickinson level. So I don't know I don't know if that touches on what you were saying. So
not really. I understand what you're. I mean, I think it goes without saying that I don't like the growls in the band. I think it's okay in a couple of places, but to get back to my point, maybe this will be more clear. You like the song "Daughters of Winterstone."
Yeah, I did, but it took me a little while to get into that one.
Right, and I've had trouble getting into that song, and I think that it's because the song itself never finds its groove. It's never comfortable. It's sort of an uncooked brownie paste. You want to eat it, but it needs 10 more minutes in the oven.
So really. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Yeah, that song does some interesting things that I totally get what you're saying, because it wasn't a song it was like a song I would skip over when I first started listening to the album, right? Like once I got the point of it, I was like, okay, I don't, and it was only when I was sort of just going back and just listening to everything 100% of the way through over and over again that I started to click with the song a little bit. Part of that is because midway through it does find its groove, right? Like towards the end of the song, it kind of starts going in a direction that's discernible, right? Vocally and musically. But also, this thing you were saying about the places she kind of has to find her footing.
Yeah.
I found there was some dramatically interesting stuff going on there. Do you know what I mean? It was like the scene that she was painting of this, it sounded like a medieval, sort of forced labor factory camp or something. Like I'm not big on lyrics like a lot of people, but I sort of was getting imagery of a certain type of situation, and I liked the way that her vocals were kind of coming in like streaks of paint, just painting little scenes. But it wasn't like, it's like you're saying, it wasn't like she wasn't painting a clear melodic line. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So dramatically it worked, kind of like the way it might work in opera, but it's not necessarily easy to just ease into with your ears.
Right. And without listening to that entire album from beginning to end again, which I would need to do, I don't know where in the album it falls and what role it's playing on the album. Right? That's important when you have a concept album like they all their albums are concept albums. So they're telling a story. The Daughters of Winterstone is probably an important part of that story, and it needs to be told this way.
Yeah.
But I think because they're a young band, they sometimes make the mistake of, well, we've got this really good groove, we got this really good riff that we wrote, and then they'll write lyrics over that part instead of enjoying that as a break from the lyrics. I
see what you're saying.
There's parts of songs where she's singing over it that I think, well, that's not really a part I would have. If I were a producer, I would just say, no, don't sing there.
Oh, I get you. Okay. See, I think that's something I actually like about them, though. I like that because she kind of does a Robert Plant thing where it's like the vocal is just doing this thing over the guitar that is sort of riffing on. You know what I mean? It's not like a standard vocal line. But in some places, it doesn't work quite as well. But like there's a song called Four in Hand where she's kind of doing that, and I think it really works well. But Daughters of Winterstone, I'm looking at the track listing now. It comes after General of the Dark Army, so it's kind of it's coming after a fairly strong song.
That's a song that you may need a break after. I don't know. I really like General. I think "Cleanse the Bloodlines" is my favorite song by them, to be honest.
Okay,
and I think it's because it's so powerful, right? You've got these moments there where she is just letting you have it as a vocalist, and she's doing that at the same time that the music is giving her the space to do that. Mm-hmm. She's not fighting the music; she's working with the music.
Okay.
And again, I think that just comes with youth. I think they're still a young band, and they have the potential to be the best female-led band out there. Not just in my opinion. I think in general opinion, right? There's a lot of people that like Nightwish, who I'm not a big fan of.
I can't stand Nightwish.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad you said that. Then I'll go that far as to say I can't stand Nightwish. But there's a lot of people that like them.
Well, see, the reason I like this band is because I feel like when you talk about Nightwish, that's what you say. You say it's like you classify it as they're a good female band or something, you know what I mean? Or a good symphonic metal band or something. But But with this band, I don't feel that qualifier is all necessary. I feel like it's just a good band. Do you know what I mean? Like
they're a fantastic band that happens to have a female lead singer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like she's showing a much better pathway for female vocalists than a lot of the other stuff I've seen in the past 10 years. Do you know what I mean? Right. Like I feel like that's because some of the stuff she's doing is just really interesting to me, and it's I don't know. I'm tremendously impressed, and she also does a lot of vocal harmonies, and she does it in a way that to me reminds me more of how Freddie Mercury used to write with vocal harmonies than how a metal singer would typically do it. But she still does it in a metal way, and so I feel like that's not easy to do. Like a lot of people layer their harmonies after the fact, and I mean I could be wrong, but I feel like she's actually writing out these harmonies as she's writing them. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like there's more compositional stuff going on with the harmonizing, which to me is always impressive. If you like, you know how like Bohemian Rhapsody was written, for example, how he really had that stuff all hammered out. You know, like he knew where the vocals were going. It wasn't just putting an additional track, and testing out another note on top of a note. There's a song, The Outlander. Like if you listen to The Outlander, I think you get that sense of it, but you can hear it in other songs that they've done. And they had another song too that I really like called Time Stands Still, which I don't know why I like that song so much. I just think the thing about this band that I got excited about was they were bringing to the table a lot of stuff that I thought wasn't really as like I don't know. I felt like I was the reason I come to metal is for bands like this. Do you know what I mean? Like that's it just has all the stuff that I'm looking for. But yeah, I don't know. They have what 4 albums, and when I was looking them up, it sounds like like bands get a pretty raw deal these days. Like I guess Napalm, like it sounds like they have to pay to make the album. It's not like I don't think it's like it used to be. So I think this band, even though they're a young band, but I think they're still kind of like a struggling band in a lot of ways. Like I don't think that they've made it, and you know what I mean. Like I think they all still have like, I could be wrong, but I got the sense that these people all still might have normal jobs and stuff.
Yeah, I think any metal band today, anybody worth their salt probably has a second job.
That was really disappointing to hear. Like that, like I hadn't thought about it because I mean, back in the day, unless it was like a like a genre band, like if I was listening to a doom metal band, I knew they might have other jobs, right? Because a lot of those bands weren't like raking in the big bucks. But you knew Metallica was doing okay. You knew that Megadeth was doing okay. You knew that the people that had reached bigger heights were doing okay.
Right.
But a lot of these bands, it looks like they're living on ramen and stuff, But somebody's making money off this stuff, right? Because they're Napalm's doing okay. So it just kind of bothered me when I heard that.
It's interesting that you bring up Napalm because one, I think they're signing the best acts right now. Most of they're the only thing I subscribe to on YouTube.
Okay, yeah, I do too.
I don't like every single band that they promote, but they seem to be doing a really good job of trying to give these bands a showcase. There could be some politics going on inside that I'm not aware of, and that's fine. Maybe they're all scumbags, but I appreciate that they're signing these small bands and that they've become the repository for this level of metal. These are bands that love doing what they're doing.
No, they do, but if you look up this band, they've had massive lineup changes, and it's almost all due to the fact that members are, like I gotta eat. Do you know what I mean? I can't keep doing this, and that seems to be a fairly common thing. Like I'm sort of torn because on one hand, I think you're right. Like Napalm does have a lot of good acts, and I remember them from back in the day, but like I also feel like shouldn't these bands not be working second jobs? If you're making music videos for them and stuff, right? Like if they're reaching, like maybe the imagery is throwing me off. Maybe I'm not realizing just how like small these bands are, but the level of performance that a band like this is bringing seems like it's a level of performance that's very professional and should be, paid appropriately. But I don't know enough about how the music industry works. I could be way off. It's just that when I was, one of the side effects of me following information about this band and looking at interviews and stuff was I just got this sense that it's like they've made it, but they really haven't. Do you know what I mean? And that seems to be the case with a lot of these bands. And I'm just wondering who's making the money.
I think you might know this, that I have a novel out. I have a novel.
I didn't know that, no.
Okay, well, there you go.
Okay.
I wrote a novel. It is available for purchase. My publisher does really nothing to promote the book.
Uh-huh.
It's my job to promote it. They're the publisher. They're the repository. They'll print the books that sell, right? But they're not going to. And they might take them to some shows here and there, but they don't. They have plenty of people on their docket that they're pushing, and I don't begrudge them that. That's the situation I signed up for, and that's fine. But I don't have the energy or the acumen to be a marketing genius, and I don't want to be. I want to be a writer, and so I don't focus on my novel writing. I focus on my game writing.
Do you want to promote the book while we're here?
No. That's silly. If you can just go find it, Jim Pinto on Amazon. It's not hard to find. What was I going to say? I think that this is all media now, right?
Yeah.
J.J. Abrams is not a good writer. He's not a good director. He's not a good creator. But he was really good at selling himself through the process of Hollywood to get where he is. He's a great politician. So the pathway to success for most people isn't talent anymore. It's being good at marketing and politicizing yourself. And I think that politicizing is probably the wrong word, but
you're like the office politic side of
it. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. And I think a band like Unleash the Archers, they're doing the traditional sleeping in a van, going on tour, hitting all these small towns to promote themselves, and none of them are good at math. So none of them are stopping and thinking, well, holy shit, it took us 100 miles to get here. Mm-hmm. We spent this much on gas, this much on food, this much on hotels, this much on moving our gear to get to a club that has 500 people. A sampling rate of 3%, which is really, really good, which is the highest sampling rate you could probably have in most fields, would mean that 15 people picked up their CD when they saw them play, right? That's $150 for 4 or 5 people for one night. None of them are doing that math when they're promoting themselves as a band. And that's the kind of thing that Napalm should be holding their hand through and saying, you guys can't be touring like this and expecting sales. You can't expect word of mouth to carry you anymore. We need to make sure that you're opening for somebody big. This is the role that Napalm should be performing. I don't know if they are, but that's how Napalm should be helping. My publisher should be telling me, Jim, we've got to get you at a convention sitting next to this other writer, right? So that people see your book when they're buying his book, because you're never going to, at the sampling rate of 3%, you're never going to move any product.
Okay, no, and that's, I mean, and I know nothing about how the music business functions, but like, and I might have misunderstood something from an interview, so maybe this is just built on me not grasping things. But the thing that bothered me wasn't all that stuff so much as I thought that what they said was they had to actually buy the album from Napalm. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I agree. I absolutely 100% believe that.
And so
I have to buy my copies of my book from my publisher.
Oh, but okay. If it's in that, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like I when I think about it in publishing it, I can sort of see it because I understand how publishing works. But I guess with music, I assumed it was still operating where, like, the Napalm is paying to make the album and paying and getting them into distribution, and all that. That it wasn't.
My understanding is they pay for the studio time. Uh-huh. They pay for the recording. They pay for the mixing because they want to own the music, right? If you want to own it, you have to do all of that. Then Napalm says, we will print the CDs for you. We think we can move 10,000, so we're going to print 10,000. Whatever the number is, I'm just picking one. And then if they want to sell copies at their shows, they have to buy from that 10,000 from Napalm. So Napalm's responsibility is taking on the financial risk of how many they print. I see. And then Unleashed the Archer's responsibility is to pay for studio time, pay for the music videos, and then pay for their own tour.
Okay. I mean, I guess my fear is with bands like this, you worry that, well, because you can see them progressing tremendously as a band.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah. And you worry that, well, are they going to burn out? Do you know what I mean? You're going to have these great bands that just evaporate because it's hard to sustain it. And again, I could be wrong. I might have misinterpreted what they were saying in these interviews, but I was like, well, they lost all these members, and it seems like that it's financially difficult for them. I mean, I remember, I think something like that was going on with Solitude Aeturnus back in the day. I kind of recall getting that sense with them too. But again, that was a genre band, so I don't know. I don't know that I would classify this band as much. I mean, people they tend to get described as power metal. Is that the label that they usually get attached to?
Yeah, I think Unleashed Archers is very general heavy metal, but power metal because of her voice, maybe.
Yeah, I tend to just classify them as heavy metal, like just based on what I've heard. But I think the vocals are distinct enough. One thing I wanted to talk about, though, because of her vocals, was how the singer she reminds me the most of is Dickinson. Like, there's definitely other singers. She's doing other things. You hear that song, Destroyer? And that's very Judas Priest-like, right? Like, that kind of has a Rob Halford vibe to it. But by and large, she's kind of got this this Dickinson-like style. And I was thinking about how it's interesting that she's got a Dickinson style because people classify them as power metal, And power metal's kind of known for having the operatic voice, right? Like they tend to have an operatic voice, and I feel like the operatic voice is a product of Dickinson. I feel like that's where it comes from. I feel like when I first heard Dickinson, the most distinct thing that you sense about his voice is the vibrato, right? Like that to me is like the thing that really stands out the first time you hear him. And that's kind of a operatic technique, right? But he's not really doing opera. Dickinson isn't somebody that you would say is an opera singer. He's not doing technical opera, but there's an operatic quality to his voice. Would you say that's generally true?
I see where you're going. I don't know that it actually is considered ish. Let's say
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Operatic. Yeah. I'm not saying he's definitely not an opera singer. He's definitely not doing opera. But what I'm getting at is when I first heard him, I was like, "Well, he kind of sounds almost like opera." That was like my first reaction to Dickinson. And so then when I heard Candlemas, I was like, "Oh wow, somebody's actually doing opera, right?" But then when it got to power metal, I was like, it was great when Dickinson kind of sounded like opera. It was really cool when Messiah Marcolin was doing opera. I don't want a whole genre of music that's opera vocals. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's too much. It's going to ruin metal if it's like all opera, because the last thing metal needs is a bunch of opera singers infiltrating the genre. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, it would ruin metal. And I think you could make an argument that it maybe has done so to a degree. Like, so what I'm getting at is I think it's interesting that she is going back to Dickinson because they're technically classified as a power metal band, but she's not doing the opera singing. She's doing it more in the style of Dickinson. And so it's kind of like when somebody goes back and corrects a musical direction that took a wrong course. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, I feel like this is like an alternate version of what power metal could have been. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. That was my thought on it. It took listening to this band for me to sort of realize what it is that bothers me about power metal, and why it's why I think with some. And I say symphonic metal too. There's a lot of symphonic metal that does that, right? Like with the opera singing and stuff. And I don't know. I think it's too much stylization of the music, and it's well past the point of when it was novel. Do you know what I mean? Like again, when Candlemas did it, it was novel and interesting. But then after that, I didn't really want it.
Right, it is the biggest problem with any kind of derivative work. I sent you that link, you and Robert, that link to that band. It was the worst, the Hoot, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, yep.
Glory Hammer, was that what it was called?
It was Glory Hammer, and it was "In Hoot We Trust" was the lyric that really leapt out.
First of all, Glory Hammer sounds like a porno. It sounds like the worst porno ever. Or the name of a place where you put 25 cents in to watch a porno.
Yeah.
So that already is bad. Then the visuals for the band are awful. They're singing in fake Latin.
Oh, right? It wasn't... Okay, so see, I assumed it was real Latin, but that's even more interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well, Magnus is Latin, but the rest of it's just gibberish nonsense. Just on top of... And the Siege of Dunkeld... In Hoots We Trust. There's so much wrong going on there all at once. And then you look at the lyrics, you hear the music, you hear the singing. That's operatic power metal garbage to the worst exponential that you could do. I think it's the worst metal I've ever heard.
I thought it was pretty... Well, what I think my response to that was it sounds like an algorithm made this music. Like an algorithm intended to sound like power metal made this music. And it's like... Which is bad. Like, that's worse than bad. That's worse than somebody sitting down to make something good and failing. Do you know what I mean? It's like... It's like, no, I'm just shooting for mediocre. Do you know what I mean? I just want to sound like power metal. That's sort of my goal. So So yeah, I can't disagree with your assessment of it. I thought it sounded very mediocre. That's how I felt about it. But you think it's because it's derivative. The derivative nature of it is what.
Yeah, well, because let's say that power metal actually starts with Helloween, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it does.
And they're a good band. I like Helloween. Helloween I can enjoy.
Yeah, they're okay. We've talked about them before. They have a couple of okay songs. But some of it gets silly, and they don't take themselves seriously. Dr. Steen makes funny creatures. We talked about that. Yep. Then you have bands like Powerwolf, and they have power right in the title, and Sabaton, and Civil War. And these bands spend their entire careers to get to the point where they're only making one good song that everybody can enjoy. You know what I mean? Uh-huh. They're so busy making all of this over-the-top nonsense. It's just so silly, and they keep making derivatives of derivatives. I talked about Animals as leaders earlier.
Yeah.
And I want to get back to that. This is a perfect time to do that. I think Dream Theater sucks. They're the worst of prog metal. Everybody loves them.
Yeah. And the only thing I want to say about that is you are definitely fighting an uphill battle against.
No, I know. But let me finish the thought, okay. And you'll see where I'm going. So Petrucci is he's just a machine, right? He's a machine that makes music, that makes chords, that makes riffs. He doesn't have any heart or soul into what he does. He just time to make another mathematically composed series of notes, and he does it, and it's another album, and it's a wall of noise. Everybody that is a derivative of Dream Theater, and a band like Animals as leaders is a perfect example, is just how many notes can we cram into a measure? How many notes can I play now? How fast and hard? How many time changes can I have before it's incomprehensible as music, right? Animals as leaders could be a great band. If you listen to them, they're all amazing musicians. But the music they're producing is incomprehensible. And you have so many derivative bands of that already botched genetic code for music.
I get you.
Right? So if you have a cell that you have a cancer cell that keeps spreading, right? It keeps splitting and making more of itself. That's not good for the host body. And I look at power metal that way. I look at any kind of prog band that's copying Dream Theater, that they already started with bad code, and they're making a derivative of that bad code. And they're never going to get to a good place that way.
I remember there was I can't remember the name of the channel, but I watch a lot of music theory channels on YouTube and stuff, and there was one guy who kind of was a middle of the road in terms of music theory, and had some interesting observations about it. And I remember I sent a question to him, which he read on his channel. He had a good answer, which wasn't my answer, but I basically was saying, is there a certain point with music theory where you get diminishing returns on the compositional side of things for a rock and roll or heavy metal band? Like if you like, is over familiarity with music theory sometimes a bad thing? Is it, or if the industry as a whole is too reliant on it, does it start to cause problems? And I'm wondering if that's kind of what's going on here, is that, not that music theory is bad, but that it's sort of, there's a lot of stuff that feels like it's just purely a product of music theory now. Do you know what I mean? Like, a lot of music is just sort of, it's just drawn right out of music theory, and it's not necessarily people sitting there and struggling to figure things out, maybe the way like a band like Metallica had to. They had some music theory knowledge because of members like Cliff Burton in the band, but by and large they were sort of learning as they went. Do you know what I mean? I don't know where I'm going with this exactly, but do you get what I'm saying?
I see where you when you do that, I think I like where you're going, and I think that there's something to be said for that. You get some fresh ideas. But you also get people reinventing the wheel, right?
Yes.
There's stuff
absolutely.
We know about music. And I talk about this in game theory all the time, because I understand game theory much better than I understand music theory. And I talk about all these game designers at the indie level who have no interest in studying the classics, who have no interest in understanding why decisions were made. And they reinvent the wheel, and they make a game that already exists just with different dice, right?
Yep.
And the same is true of music. If you're going all the way back to square one and you don't want to listen to anybody that's ever made music before and you want to try to create something from scratch, you're either going to make something that's incomprehensible or you're eventually going to lead to a path where, oh, somebody's already done that.
No, that's true.
The chance of making something unique in that pathway is nigh impossible.
But there are two different things going on there. There's one of them is listening to other bands that came before you, right? So like,
right.
Obviously you have to do that. You can't just say, well, I'm not going to go back and listen to the stuff that led to the music that I'm making because I know what I want and I'm a special individual and I'm super creative. Right. That's a bad idea in pretty much any creative industry, or you don't want to do that. But music theory is a whole other thing, right? Music theory are all these tools that you can use to analyze music, to make music. Most musicians have a certain level of music theory knowledge. But it seems like right now, maybe because of YouTube, maybe because of other things going on, we're at a point where people are hyper aware of music theory, and there's a lot of it in music. And sometimes it's a good thing, but sometimes I sit there and I go, I wonder if this is all such a good thing, because as much as I like music and I think music theory has value, I feel like there's, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of autopilot going on with the application of music theory. And if somebody, like, yeah, you might reinvent the wheel. Like maybe somebody figures out something about harmonies that they would have been able to find in music theory more easily. But sometimes there's something about bands like that do it a little bit more rough and don't even realize that they're doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Versus a band that's doing it in circles around them, but there's no real core to it. There's no real like inspiration behind it, because there isn't that struggle. They can just slap it on. Do you know what I'm saying? Whereas this other band, they had to work really hard just to get that sound, because they don't necessarily know how the pieces fit together to get there.
I think you're talking about the 10,000 hours problem. Right?
Okay, go ahead.
You need to spend 10,000 hours doing a thing to get good at it, right?
Yeah.
It's not exactly 10,000. It's different for everybody, but it's a generally accepted term. I think if you haven't put in your 10,000 hours on a guitar and you're trying to invent a new sound, chances are you're not going to succeed, right? You don't know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Have you, what's his name? Morello from Rage Against the Machine?
Tom Morello. Yeah, I know.
Tom Morello?
I'm not very familiar with his music, though. I just know the Rage Against the Machine and some of the stuff from Audio Slave that they did.
Have you ever heard how he came up with his sound?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's a fascinating story. He was really poor, and he could only afford one guitar. Mm-hmm. His guitar wasn't a very good guitar. It didn't have all the tools that everybody else's guitar had. And he was practicing, trying to get good. And he had one power switch on it, on the top, and he would be able to turn it on and off really quickly to create that choppy sound in his work. So his sound developed as a reflection of his tools. But it didn't happen just because he had a bad guitar, right?
Yeah.
Anybody can buy a bad guitar at a swap meet. He still had to put in his 10,000 hours. And I think that's the hard part, because we only see success stories. We only see people once they've completed the ritual of becoming good at what they do. We don't realize what it took, say, Chuck Jones, the illustrator, to become the best cartoonist in the history of cartoons. We don't know what it took for him to get there. Well, we only know Chuck Jones when he's done.
And I guess that's the other piece of the puzzle. I think what you're describing to me is the 10,000 hours, but it's also him figuring some of the stuff out himself, right? Like, right. He's like, nobody's giving him that roadmap. The music theory stuff takes you 10,000 hours, right? Like music theory is deep. It's, you know, right. I'm still like just a middling person when it comes to music theory, because it's so extensive, and there's a lot of stuff in it that I struggle with still. And I know that that's true with a lot of guitarists that I know. You know, there's no varying degrees of music theory. But I just wonder if, you can, if you're putting all of your 10,000 hours into music theory and it's not, I don't know, you're not doing what Tom Morello did. Is something going to be missing from the picture? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if it's also hard because it's not like I'm analyzing individual musicians and saying what was the path this musician took to get to where he is. So I'm kind of just speculating, but I just kind of get this sense from a lot of music that the overabundance of music theory itself is affecting the kind of music that's being made, and like in some cases it works, like in a lot of the prog music it can work really well, but there are times, like you were pointing out, where I feel like it's detrimental, like where it's become its own aesthetic, and it's producing that genetic code that you were talking about, where where like sometimes I'll listen to music, right, and it'll just like, I kind of know what the guy's doing. I know that they're using like, scales and modes to just kind of shred all over this weird chord progression that defies certain expectations of how chord progressions are supposed to work, right? And sometimes that sounds almost like nothing to me. Do you know what I mean? And like you were saying, that was the case with that band that the Animal something?
Animals as Leaders.
Yeah. Like that was your experience with that band, right? Like it's just sort of like there's nothing that you could sink your ear into, right? Like you just couldn't. And I think it's because it works on a music theory level, but it doesn't work on like an emotional level. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think to get to the emotional level, you have to go something down the road that Tom Morello was going down. On top of the music theory. So I don't know. That's sort of what I'm saying. Is I don't know. There's like a certain amount of heart that's missing because a lot of music is maybe all brain now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, we're doing everything in vacuums, right? And real quick, just to get back to the point, I don't want to lose this, is you have people in the past who learned how to play their instruments and made just music first.
Yeah.
Right? Fates Warning wasn't making prog out the gate. They were just making metal.
Yeah.
They were making generic metal when they started, and it took a long time to find their sound. And I think when you're working in a vacuum, when you're working at home by yourself and you're watching videos on YouTube to learn how to play guitar, and especially if you're watching bad videos, right? If you're watching people who think they know what they're talking about and all they know is 4 chords, and all they play is acoustic, they're not going to help you get to a place where you are passionate about music or that you love what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you're working at home by yourself and you're just replicating the things that you're seeing and you're not mastering them and then experimenting with them, right? We talked about this about Tool. The guitar player from Voivod, who's also in Tool, he will play the shit out of a riff. He will come at it for every fucking angle he can come at and then decide, is that worth keeping or moving on? And so that experimentation that he's doing came after years. He's been doing this for 20 plus years, right? He didn't say at the age of 15, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the shit out of something I don't even understand.
Yeah. I'm
going to try every single riff I can possibly try when I don't even know how to hold my hands on the fretboard yet.
Yeah.
And I think... I'm reiterating what I've said before. I think people don't understand how much work it takes because they're just looking at success stories and they're not looking at the path of success stories. And we just talked about this on my other podcast with Richard about what it takes to make it in the gaming hobby, right? There are people that just like games, so they think that's enough to make a game. And then there's people that think you could just make money at gaming because they see somebody else make money at gaming. And nobody comes at it passionately enough. And you get all this derivative hack nonsense. Any of these games that are just copies of D&D aren't any good. And the same is true of music, that this is just a copy of a copy of a copy. And I'm repeating myself now, so I'll shut up.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Is it fine that I'm shutting up, or is it fine that I was
it's
repeating
fine
myself?
that you're repeating yourself. It's fine that you're repeating yourself. I don't.
You should have said it's fine that you're shutting up. That
would have been more funny. I know. But sometimes I don't want. I don't want to be cruel today. I want to be kind.
I'm not a delicate flower.
No, I know that. I know. But first episode back, I think we should probably go a little bit light. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like, and I don't mind derivative stuff sometimes. Like, I like genre stuff. I like, in the gaming context, I like retro clones and stuff like that. And in music, I like things that are discernible genre of metal. But I feel like when they do that, they need to go back to the originals. You need to pay your respects to the heavies in metal. And and there are plenty of bands doing that, but there's sometimes I'll listen to music and I'll be like, it doesn't sound like this band heard anything before 1985. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
And I think that produces a shallowness that isn't present if they've listened to the stuff going way back. And stuff beyond metal. Like, I think if you're a metal guitarist, you should listen to Jimi Hendrix. Do you know what I mean? Jimi Hendrix is not metal, but I think he's really important guitarist to listen to.
Yeah, I'm not. That's a really good point.
And I'm not like super into Hendrix, but like I listened to him when I was playing. I same with all these other even genres that I didn't like, I would listen to. And so I think that's necessary, but either way, I don't want to go super negative on music, because we were talking about bands that we kind of liked. So I think and this is why I found Unleash the Archers so refreshing, was just that a lot of the stuff that was annoying me, I wasn't having that problem with them. Do you know what I mean? So that's why, especially vocally, the really refreshing thing about the band for me was the vocals. I think really one of the things that's been kind of bothering me in general about metal is just, I feel like vocally a lot of what I hear is kind of adrift, and so it kind of makes sense given that metal is sort of structured around having really grating and unique vocals. But there's just like this tendency to do this thing where you have the clean vocal and then the growl, or you have all growls, or like, I don't know. I just don't know if I even really want to hear growl anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like,
and it's dying, right? It's dying as a tool. But go ahead.
Oh no, yeah. I just feel like like, again, I'll put Bolt Thrower in. I'll listen to Obituary or Death from time to time, and I'll listen to Cathedral that also kind of have a growl, but I think now when I hear it, especially because everybody's trying to put their own unique twist on it, it always just sounds more and more cartoonish. It doesn't sound like it's actually... I don't think it's a vocal style that can progress any further than it got with death metal. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was sort of the end of the sound for me with the growl. And so, when I hear it now, I don't know, it just... Maybe I'm just an old man. I'll just hear a band and I'll be like, that sounds ridiculous. Like, I know when I listened to Obituary when I was younger, to adults, Obituary sounded ridiculous, but I swear there's a difference between Obituary and some of the stuff I'm hearing today. Like, there's a difference that matters. And I don't know, I think, again, it's the derivative thing. I think when you have a band that's now, like, Obituary wasn't listening to Obituary. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I mean? There were other things going on vocally than just the growl. And I don't... Right. And I think that now it's kind of like just a self-parody when I hear it. And it's probably due to the derivative thing. But yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer were bands that survived without good lead singers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they made Lemons They made lemonade out of lemons, basically.
Right. They built their sound around the fact that, well, we don't have a good lead singer, and we don't want to sound like Judas Priest. We don't want to sound like Iron Maiden. We want our own sound, and the only way to do that is by controlling the amount of people in this band, right? You add a frontman to Metallica, right? Now Metallica's beholden to that guy.
Yeah.
Now we have to make a sound. Whatever sound he wants to do for the next album, we've got to work around that. And he's not one of the original creators. So all of these bands, they maintain sort of this authority, or not authority, what's the word I'm looking for? Control. Maintains this sort of control over their sound because the original guys were part of not just making the music, but also singing the songs.
Yeah.
All these bands have lead singers who do something else in the band.
Yeah. And James Hetfield is basically a rhythm guitarist, and it shows in his voice.
Yeah. And so you have these bands that come afterwards, Morbid Angel or Death Angel or whatever the band
Morbid
was.
Angel. I think there was Death Angel too, but Morbid Angel was.
They come after this, and it starts to sound sloppy, in my opinion. And this is my opinion.
I think Morbid Angel is a thing of beauty, but go on.
Yeah, I know you do. It starts to sound sloppy because people are now saying, well, if Slayer can do this with vocals and succeed, what can we do with all these noises and still create... It becomes a cacophony to me.
Yeah.
But to people that like that sort of noise, that's where it grows, right? That's where the growl eventually happens. I'm not saying Morbid Angel made the growl. Yeah. I'm just saying... I think
Death is technically considered the first death metal band.
Is it?
Yeah, I think Death is. Because they were doing that in like 86, 87, something like that.
But even Death's growl wasn't as ridiculous and Cookie Monster-ish as, say, early Opeth.
No, but it's pretty growly. Do you know what I mean? It's the Death growl. No, you listen to Death, and it's a little bit more palatable, I think, when you listen to Death, because they know that what they're doing is not sounding very pleasant to the ear. Do you know what I mean? So they have to really do it well. By the time it becomes an aesthetic, it's sort of like what you're talking about, I think.
Right. Metal fans are puritanical assholes, and I'm a perfect example of that. And you have to pass a lot of litmus tests to get your sound to be accepted into the metal community. Mm-hmm. And so the baby steps it takes for the growl to become as pervasive as it is, that didn't happen overnight, and eventually it became oversaturated, right?
Yeah.
How does anybody listen to Necrophagist? I don't even know how you listen to that band. It is just... that is like a headache machine. That is what it's designed to do, is just rattle your skull until you fall to the ground and you're unable to walk because of your migraine. I'm not saying they're a bad band. They know what they're doing. They're all technically proficient guys, but what they've come up with, for me, is just too much. And there's tons of people who think Necrophagist is fantastic.
Well, technically proficient and good are different. Like we were talking about Deicide, and we both kind of agreed we didn't really dig Deicide, and they were very technical. They were tight as, and I don't think there's like a tighter death metal band than Deicide. Like, you get why people like them, but it all kind of sounded similar to me. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just think, and again, I get why the death metal bands didn't appeal to you, and I had a certain level of resistance to them when I first encountered them, and it was never, the death growl was never my favorite vocal style. Like, it's not, it was always something where it's like, well, there's a lot of other interesting stuff going on in this music, and so I'm going to listen to it, but the early death metal bands, they were still, like, when I sent you that Obituary album, to me the thing that's interesting about it is the different things that he's doing rhythmically and tonally to create distinctions between the different tracks in the album. And I that's something that I don't hear as much these days. And again, when we were listening to this stuff when it was coming out, it was just considered noise. It's not like it was considered some classic metal that people might regard it as today. This stuff was like, I remember when I would attempt to play a band like Obituary or even Bolt Thrower at my house, my dad, who's a very tolerant person, just couldn't. He would explode. Do you know what I mean? He just couldn't handle it. And I think that was a pretty typical reaction to something like death. I think he said his description of death metal was, "This person sounds very constipated. Can you please turn it off?" You know, that was sort of that was how he described it. But yeah, I don't know. Any other? We're coming on the 1 hour mark, so I don't want to kill you tonight. But any other topics you wanted to address?
You know that we both can stay. We can talk. We'll talk for 2 more hours after we're done recording, because that's what we do.
Well, that's true. Except I have to get my wife at 10, so if I talk for 2 hours, I'll be dead by morning.
That is not my problem, though.
No. My wife said to me one day, she said, "If I had a weapon, I would kill you." That was, and I don't think she was joking. Wow. Yeah. So I'm going to pick her up on
court later. I'm just saying.
No.
I'm going to sound like a hypocrite now after all this making fun of the death growl, and I'm going to say I love Ginger, the band Ginger.
I think you showed me Ginger recently.
Yeah. She does both, right? She does the really high, wonderful harmonics, and just a wonderful voice, and then she'll do the death growl thing. It's not the same kind of death growl. It's not the Cookie Monster voice, but it falls into that category of unlistenable. If that's all she did, I would say I can't stand this band. But I put up with it to get to the rest of it.
Yeah, I generally am kind of that way these days. Now, I will say I find female death growls much more palatable than male death growls. Maybe because they're just more novel to my ear. Do you know what I mean? I haven't heard as many female death growls, so when I hear it, it sounds a little bit distinct. And I think the higher pitch works a little bit better. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, I know that Arcona is another band where they have a female singer who does the growl and the clean. And I'm, you know, that I can enjoy. But I don't know. I just, it's kind of like the growl is the last thing I want to hear when I'm hearing good metal music now. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, and again, the way that it's handled in Unleash the Archers, it's in small doses. But I feel like what the death growl does is it detracts from the credibility of the lyrics. Do you know what I mean? It's like I would be taking this so much more seriously if you weren't growling those words. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, and I just find it perplexing when a band has a perfectly good, clean vocalist, why they would alternate between the two. Right. Like I get that it's a technique that has it creates a certain atmosphere. There's all these things. I don't know. I just don't know that I'm a huge fan of it these days.
And we're right back to the original point, which is some of these bands are young and they haven't learned to edit themselves yet.
Yeah, well, and again, I think in a lot of these bands, what's pouring out of them is a lot of really good technique too, and so there's that. It's like you understand why there's these excesses, because a lot of the excesses that we were commenting on were things like shredding on the guitar, for example, or just things that you would want to do if you were a really good band. Do you know what I mean? And it takes a long time, I think, to get to the point where you have a more restrained approach to the sound. It's kind of like when you just graduate from college, you really want to show off all your $1 million words. Do you know what I mean? And then you come to anybody who's like 10 years out of school, and they're talking a lot more like how they talked before they went to college. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that's the same that happens with music. Person gets to a really high level, and then they want to show it off, and then once they've matured, they kind of tone that down a little bit, and they get back to writing good music.
Right.
So, but yeah, I don't know. Do we have any other topics, or are we done for the evening with this one?
I think whoever's listening has had it anyway, so we should probably just sign off.
Okay, all right. So we'll head out. We are going to be doing that Seventh Son of a Seventh Son podcast at some point.
Yeah, if Rob would stop writing so much and take a minute to talk with us.
Talk about really important metal stuff instead of doing his
What
job.
is more important than talking about that album?
Yeah, that's. I think it's very important, but I think it's understandable that he's working on what is he working on now? Did he say, or is that under?
He's updated it on his page. He's working on 4 different expansions for Shadow of the Demon Lord that he owes.
That's a lot.
So.
Oh, is it like a Kickstarter type thing? Like, is he doing?
No, well, one of them's a Kickstarter. The other ones are just things that he's been promising for a long time would be expanded on in the world.
Okay.
I wrote a PDF for it a long time ago, and it's really hard to write for that world. It's so crunchy. There's so much data, and you don't want to do it wrong. There's a certain tone to it.
And what's the name of the PDF you wrote?
It was about Balgrendia, the land of Balgrendia. I don't remember what the final title was. Queen of Air and Darkness, maybe.
Okay. It's on. Is it on RPG? Drive Through RPG, or is it?
Yeah, it's on Drive Through RPG. Okay. They're getting rid of RPG now.
They did already. I tried because I used to always go to RPG Now, and I went there the other day, and it's like, nope, doesn't exist anymore. So it's gone. But Drive Through RPG is still up. So. I mean, it's smart. It really was annoying to have half of your sales, like, depending on how the split happened, you could kind of get screwed on those coinage badges that they have. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Because if you sold like 20 on one site and like, you know, I don't know what the like you could get just under the number than if it had all been on one site. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can get 20 shy of 100 or whatever the cutoff point is. I can't remember what the cutoff point is for the first one, but it was very easy to kind of screw yourself. And the savvy people know to just mark it to the same one every time.
Right.
But the stupid people like me kind of just randomly split it up. But yeah, so anyways, we'll be back on. I don't know. We're going to talk about concept albums. I know we have a bunch of topics we want to get to. So we'll be back on and we'll talk about more metal stuff. And until then, we will talk to you later. Your